I've been oddly chomping at the bit, waiting to talk about this. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and this is Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1. Dun dun dun. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died. Yeah. Feel patriotic yet? Are we? What else can I do for you? I should have worn an American flag for this. It's directed by Kevin Costner. It's currently available on Max. It has audio description done by Deluxe, narrated by Jedediah Barton. And by the way, I'm just gonna say, there's two things to this. One, of course, somebody named Jedediah should be narrating this. B, it's also not his real name. So I think he just kind of fell into this. I think it's very serendipitous, because when you get to the end, you're like, of course, Jedediah is doing something where they're, yes, it feels very of the period. Like, it feels one of those names where you're just like, whatever happened to it? Where did it go? Does anybody get named that anymore? Like, what happened to all the Judds? You know? Like, where did they go? So, Beauregard. You know, I mean, there's just some names where you're like, no one gets named that anymore. Anyway, Horizon, the film that broke film criticism, broke the internet in many ways. But I want to talk about that after I say just a little bit about the film. So, Horizon is Kevin Costner's answer to Yellowstone. This is a man who, he loves two things. He loves baseball and he loves Westerns. And one day he will figure out a way how to make a baseball Western. You know what I'm saying? He will make a film about people in the Wild West, a bunch of cowboys, and they're playing a baseball game inexplicably for no reason whatsoever. That'll be his magnum opus. Just right at the end of the final Kevin Costner film, baseball cowboys. But yeah, it's so this is intended to be a 4-part franchise. He's pre-planned it. He has already shot the second part. So there is more to this, which is heavily factoring into how I view this film and how I grade this film. And should have been factored in actually to a lot more critics, in my opinion. Again, more stuff we're going to talk about. I'm putting some critics on blast too here a little bit. It's got a massive cast. Just unreasonable amount of people in this film, because you have all these different stories that I'm sure by the time we get to part 4 will all converge. But in part 1, they're actually have absolutely nothing to do with each other. So you're having to watch a lot of things that have nothing to do with each other eventually come to a point in the story where the movie just kind of ends, but it doesn't ever bring anything together, and there's no conclusion to this film. So it does follow Indigenous people. I think we use the term Indigenous, which is not a term that they would have used during this time period. I also heard the term Aboriginal, and I'm entirely sure that's a term we would have used. So while I appreciate Kevin Costner trying to use the appropriate language, the argument to not do that would be sort of like the whitewashing of history. People don't show up to like 12 Years a Slave and expect like there to not be this, like a certain depiction of slavery, and expect there to be like polite words being given. They know what they're going to hear. And I think we didn't really do that here. I think he's worried about giving the old cinematic trope of how Indigenous people have been represented on camera in America as being these sort of just wild creatures that attack without reason. But he doesn't represent them that way. There is violence in here from them, but he also takes time to follow them as actual characters. so you understand why it is that they do the things that they do, instead of just like characters who just don't speak our language and we're just never going to bother to see. That's the thing about westerns, that when they did that before, they just kind of used them as like boogeymen. And here, Kevin Costner is invested in them as characters, which is something that Taylor Sheridan also really does well, even though these two don't see eye to eye anymore. They both actually attempt to really bring out purpose in Indigenous actors for being there, instead of just, I'm here to commit violence. I'm here for some scalps, you know? Is there scalping? Sure. Is there discussion why they're scalping? Sure. Like, one of my favorite parts is when one of the Indians brings the scalp back, and his, I want to say elder, is like, we can't eat that. I was like, that's such a great line. I don't know if it's appropriate for this time period, but I was like, but it goes to show just sort of like, the representation. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're actually getting into a story with this culture, with the people of the tribe actually have a little bit to do. And over the course of 4 films, who knows where their characters are going to go, where they're going to head. There's a little bit of a really interesting power struggle between like the young and the old, and how they view people coming into this world. Of course, we know of what history has in store for them. So we know who's right in this, ultimately, who probably should have been given a little bit more credence. But yeah, it's interesting to see those sort of like political debates, as to like, what should we do? Is this the way we should be doing it? Do we need to be attacking and scalping? Probably, some of them are like, no, I don't think so. We should be. And they're like, well, we can't even hunt deer because it keeps scaring them away. So what else am I going to hunt? I found it fascinating. Anyway, so kudos to Costner for giving time to those characters. Meanwhile, he has to give screen time to himself, because he's in this, along with a bunch of other actors. Some of them feel fine. Some people have had a problem with Luke Wilson in this. I didn't really feel like he felt too modern. There were some other actors here that felt really out of place, and so I would not give this like a casting award. There are a couple people in here, mostly minor characters, mostly kids, that felt like they were going to go play Xbox. Like, there's kind of like a fight scene early on with some kids who, they're being teased, or they were doing some stuff, and just the way that they were speaking just didn't feel like it was like of the period. And he probably could have swapped out some of these actors with some more. He does have Will Patton in this, and Will Patton is somebody who's an excellent actor, B, perfect for this, and sounds perfect for the time period. Also a friend of his from Yellowstone. I honestly wish he had just restructured the movie and made Will Patton the lead, because I love Will Patton as an actor, and I don't think he ever gets his due as an actor. So I would have much rather appreciated much more screen time from Will Patton. He feels like somebody who belongs in a Western, and he feels like somebody who also belongs in a Western set in the 1800s. So he feels like somebody who can pull that off. Whereas some of these other people, they feel like they're trying to pull that off. That's the thing that people have picked up about Luke Wilson. Is it like, is he still? It's like same thing with Sam Worthington, an Australian actor coming here, trying to pull off being old westerny American. He's like a military man. So there's some people that just, it's like, I don't know. Sienna Miller's in this. She's like British, so she's trying to pull it off too. We do have Jena Malone, and I think she did a pretty good job. So, and then other people pop up, like Michael Rooker is in this. Scott Hayes. God, there's a whole bunch of people in this. It's just, the cast list is just unforgettably long. Just so many people. I wanted like the kind of people that are like duh. You know, like, of course they should be in this. Like, I don't know, is Sam Elliott, I know he's old. Sam Elliott is still acting, I'm hoping. Bring him, like, where is he? Why is Sam Elliott, like, Sam Elliott and Will Patton should have been, like, stars in this film, because they feel so much like they're made for Westerns. I would make the argument that Josh Brolin, after Outer Range, would have been great in a Western like this. After having seen him in that. I don't know, the casting here is weird. We get people like Michael Langareno, has a small part here. Um, I don't know, a bunch of people that you're just like, Westerns? All right. Okay. I guess. It's violent. It's a Western, it should be. It's kind of hard to put down. That's the thing about me with film criticism on this, is it's really hard to put my foot down and say isn't this isn't good because blank. It's the start of something. It's chapter 1. It's Fellowship of the Ring. It's it knows there's a part 2 coming. But at the same time, what I would say to Costner now is, until I hear, like, fundamentally that they're doing 3 and 4, I'm gonna look at part 2 when that's released and be like, okay, so how does this wrap up? Because we do have this thing that happens every once in a while where people think they're gonna get a sequel and then they leave it this hanging chad, and then they don't get it. That's the dangerous thing. But here, he didn't know he had part 2 in the can, so he could leave it the way that he leaves it, which is fine. We can't blast them for that. You don't, I'm sorry, critics of the world, you don't get to sit there and tell me how awesome the last Spider-Verse movie was, which had no ending to it, and then come in and be like, well, Horizon doesn't have an ending. And the fuck is your point? You know, like, what's the problem? You know? That last film had no ending either, and you guys were all like, it should be nominated for Best Picture. So, I just have a problem with the contrariness of it all. The just dropping it and being like, one film should be Best Picture and the other one is like, it literally ends with like this weird like 5-minute like cutscene thing that just kind of like previews the next Horizon film. I mean, kind of. It kind of just like fast forwards to, like, it feels like not really like the next episode, but maybe like next season. Like, maybe they're sort of like the way that House of the Dragon ended a little bit this season. Anyway, I would say that in a world where we're trying to figure out, do we keep doing these chapter 1s or part 1s? You know, like Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning was part 1, and obviously its box office suffered because of it. So they took away the part 1. But it's not the first film to do that. Now it's just Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, but it was released as Dead Reckoning Part 1. And it doesn't really have, like, the full conclusion. It has a somewhat of a conclusion, but it's clearly, like, if that was the last Mission Impossible film, people would be like, I hate this film now. You know? Like, it doesn't really leave you with the kind of satisfying ending that could possibly be for the Mission Impossible franchise. Neither does Spider-Verse, and neither does Horizon. So what's different between these 3 films is that Horizon's being put on blast while the other films are not. Why is that? And I've been diving into this because it gets really stupid. It goes down the rabbit hole. So what's happening is we have gotten a rise in, I don't know why. It's film criticism, guys. First of all, I think I think we're all just trying to be honest. You know, the advice that I got a long time ago was to just be me. Originally, I was trying to be like what I thought people wanted from film criticism, and just like really like giving those sort of like very studious reviews of things, and people are like, well, you have no voice. What is your voice? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm writing like everybody else, right? Aren't I? No. So now I have my voice and I speak the way that I do, and fuck you if you're bothered by it. But for some reason we have like conservative film reviews channels. Like we've broken off into like some pretty obvious people who are like aimed at like right news, and those people loved Horizon, and they're all over, and they were accusing the other side of being mean to Horizon, and I thought it was so hilarious because I was like, guys, I know you're fighting for Kevin Costner here, but you do know he's Democrat, right? Like he actually did fundraising for Pete Buttigieg. Like, I don't know if people actually thought about that, but hey, progressively great. I love when these conservatives are advocating for somebody who's not. Good for you. Um the way to go out there and be like, oh, that really progressive Kevin Costner, he's getting a raw deal. Yeah. So Horizon is definitely getting shafted in some ways because people are giving it this weird sort of thing that they didn't give to other films like it, where they're like, oh, it doesn't really have, it doesn't end. Neither did the films last year, and one of them everybody wanted in Best Picture. So it's like, I don't understand what you're talking about. You know, I every critic who was so excited over Spider-Verse and then came into Horizon was like, why? Who are you? Stop being stupid. So I do have a problem with the fact that these films don't have endings, but it's not like an unbreakable problem. Like I gave Spider-Verse an A-. I think I gave Dead Reckoning an A-, and both of those were largely based on the fact that it was like, I like the film, but yeah, it doesn't really have an ending. And so Horizon is like, yeah, it doesn't really have an ending, but I'm also really curious to know where it picks up from. Same thing with the other films. It's like, where do we go from here? Because in many ways there's stuff that's set up here where it's like, I need to know how this plays out, but I don't know how it plays out because it doesn't. And I think that's where longevity comes into play, because in a weird way, and this goes for the other films too, if you don't land part 2, then part 1 will suffer. The way that you remember part 1, I mean, you think right now you're going to be like, oh, well, Spider-Verse it's always going to be a classic. I mean, they could, if they completely, just go with me on this, if they completely fuck up the sequel, you will not like the middle film as much in that trilogy. I mean, if it doesn't end the right way, if for some reason every hope and dream you've ever had for that franchise just falls apart and they just, Madam Web it or something, I don't know. It just, if it just doesn't land, then you'll be like, well, so all the stuff they built into something that didn't work. So then the buildup didn't mean anything. And I think there's a part of that that's true. It's the same thing with Dead Reckoning. It's like, okay, so you're building up to something, but then if the something isn't anything that's worth anything, then it will go back, and I think it will affect the way that you view the other films. Unfortunately, that's not how film criticism works, because I don't think those people can pull their reviews from Rotten Tomatoes and then be like, well, so that's the weirdness of doing this halfway thing, part 1, part 2 thing, and having these films that don't really have endings, and then we have to grade them. But I'm not going to not grade Horizon, because again, I did grade the other films. So why would I grade Horizon lower? Well, I do have reasons beyond the fact that it doesn't have an ending, which I admitted caused me to give the other 2 films A-. So I can use that as a way to already say, well, Horizon's not getting an A, because neither of those other films that I'm referencing got A's. So I felt like there were actors here that were pulling focus because they were too modern, and I wanted a little bit more given to the actors who were modern. I wish there was some semblance of like a cohesive plot here, because it doesn't feel like Horizon is at the center. It just feels like American expansion is the center. And I think that's probably, like, thematically, that's sort of also a question I have for like the larger work when we do finally see all of Horizon, is it's like it kind of starts off where it's like, okay, well, this is Horizon. And they do kind of reference it, but it never feels like it is the driving force of the film. It kind of feels like we're bouncing around and we have other ideas about, this wagon train or these soldiers or people surviving an attack from indigenous populations. There's a woman who like ran away and people are trying to get her and to come back. And there's a lot of just ideas happening here, and they don't all necessarily have to tie into Horizon. So I'm sort of interested to see how they tie into Horizon, which is sort of this fictional town, like a utopia that everybody's was promised, to head out to. I don't know why Kevin Costner didn't just tell the story of Oregon, which was a very specific thing for very different set of reasons. But he could have almost told that story here. He's not that far removed from it. So, yeah. Some of it works. Some of it's compelling. I don't like the use of words like indigenous and aboriginal in the movie. In the audio description, it's fine because the audio description can be modern and can be the use of today. But I think when we pull our punches in terms of what the content is in a film, it comes across as whitewashing, comes across as us trying to like do what we're trying to do to our history books now, which is kind of like, that whole like the thing that you see that kids are having to fill out where it's like, list the positive sides of slavery. And you're like, there are none. You motherfuckers. That doesn't exist. Stop pushing that narrative. It kind of feels like, nobody was running around saying that in those times. They were using racial slurs. Why aren't we using those? So, it's like he's afraid to use them, but at the same time, I can't believe that these characters wouldn't be using them. I just find that really hard to believe that there's not at least, we are not that progressive of a country in this time period, that there aren't characters running around being racist towards indigenous populations of America, the tribes. So it doesn't quite land. I appreciate Costner's attempt at direction here. I like it. I actually, in general, don't hate anything Kevin Costner's really directed before. I don't think he is. I think he's always been chasing the praise that he got from Dances with Wolves, which I think is one of those films that hasn't necessarily aged quite as well. I don't think people look at Dances with Wolves as being like the pinnacle of filmmaking, but more like a film that he kind of just stumbled into that ended up being pretty good. And then he made like Wyatt Earp. And by the way, the story, the fascinating, I don't want to do a whole thing on this, but if anybody ever has time to research Wyatt Earp and Tombstone, it is fascinating what happened with that and how much of a douche Kevin Costner was. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I know that he like says he's not, and he's tried to downplay it. But when you really kind of like look at the tea leaves, you're like, I don't know, dude. It really feels like you kind of knew what you were doing back then. So there's that. And Waterworld was campy fun, even when you watched it. Like, I remember watching Waterworld as a kid and being like, this is so weird. And anytime you watch Waterworld, it's kind of having a resurgence because people are rediscovering it. And I think they're rediscovering it in the same way like maybe my generation like rediscovered, I don't know, Rollerball before the remake. Like the remake made people go back and watch the original Rollerball. You know what I'm saying? And be like, wow, this is weird. And The Postman, I didn't hate The Postman that much. It's not perfect. But there's some stuff. I think Kevin Costner's an okay director. I miss Small Yellowstone. I don't know what the final couple episodes are going to look like. But I wish he had been able to work it out. But also I thought his demands, at least the demands that I heard, were definitely unreasonable. So, and I think there's more to that. I think he had just was at a point with his working relationship with probably Taylor Sheridan that he just didn't want to come back. So he basically just asked for ridiculous things, knowing that Taylor would say no, so he could go do Horizon. And now we have Horizon, and we'll have Horizon Chapter 2 or Part 2 at some point, because it's already been made. So even if it goes straight to streaming, it will be released. It's not gonna be one of those things that we just never see, because Kevin Costner independently financed this, so it's not even like, was he gonna use it as his own tax write-off? No, he had too much hubris. It will be released somewhere. The question is where. I think he is filming Part 3. The question is, will he finish it? And then is he going to have to cut it so that it becomes a 3-chapter thing instead of a 4? Anyway, I'm intrigued, and I'm going to be, like I said, I'm going to be as optimistic as I was about the other Part 1s, and thinking that my resolution is coming. And so I'm thinking about the world that's set up. I'm thinking about the questions that are being asked and the potential path for these characters, much like we were being asked to do with Spider-Verse and Dead Reckoning last year, and not be a complete dick and be like, this film has no ending. I hate it. And also I don't want to be the person who's like, woke Hollywood is killing American filmmaking. This film's the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Because it's not. It's neither of those things, but it is better than probably a lot of people have given it credit for. Certainly ambitious. So yeah, it's a film that we should probably discuss a hell of a lot more than we are. It probably deserved more eyes on it when it was in theaters. I don't know. It's very weird. I hear the complaints about how it probably could have been a miniseries, and it's like, I see that. But also, I mean, you could make that comment really about pretty much damn near anything that you want to just see more from, just to let it go longer, and have that story told in different ways. We're starting to use this like chapter thing a lot. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3. You know what I'm saying? Like Furiosa has like chapters now. So I would say that's a great way of showing that, well, Chapter 1 could have been the first episode, Chapter 2 could have been the second. I mean, like, we could read the tea leaves into a lot of these films. It doesn't need to be just Horizon. So I'm giving Horizon and American Saga a B. I think in general there's stuff here. I probably would have recast a couple things, but mostly I'm optimistic and I'm intrigued by Part 2. Like, I want to see where Part 2 goes, but at the same time, I want to say, and I acknowledge, because I think it's true of the other films too, that these grades are fluid, and they almost have to be. And I know Rotten Tomatoes and sites like that are not set up to be, where we go back and change our grade. But when you're asking us to kind of hold on, but at the same time, we have to release our reviews, a lot of holding on is me being like, okay, well, I trust you, and I trust where this is headed. The difference is Horizon is not a franchise that's earned my trust at all, unlike the Spider-Man franchise or Mission Impossible franchise. So you're asking me to hold on, and it's like I'm trusting Kevin Costner, who doesn't always land it perfectly. Sometimes it's a bumpy landing. So I could see myself coming back around to this years later, and then also being like, I'm giving Horizon on a second look a C+. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, if the things don't resolve, and you're like, well, that was your vision? Then why was I ever here to begin with? Why did you do that stuff in the first film? That doesn't make any sense anymore. And you're just hoping it all makes sense. So I'm willing to go on the ride. And I think people who watch this, hopefully they're willing to go on that ride too. But we need to stop acting like assholes because it's Part 1. It's so stupid. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Jedediah's narration here is fantastic, by the way. I didn't even get time to talk about that. Probably one of the better narrations I've had this year. There's a lot of violence and a lot of characters to track here. And I thought they did a really nice job with that. And his voice is perfect for this. The only way they could have gotten more better would have been to tell Jedediah to have like an old-timey accent, you know, like an old-timey, like westerny. Honestly, really the only way that you could have made this film better is had the audio description be Sam Elliott. Since he's not in the film, if Deluxe had just called up Sam Elliott and been like, can you do the audio description for Horizon? I know that like totally changes the game of what we're doing with audio description, but it would have really added sort of that like old-timey westerny feel to it. Not that Jedediah is the wrong choice here, but because we're never gonna get anybody like Sam Elliott to do that, but maybe that would have been it. Anyway, more Will Patton, please. Just in life. I like him. I wish he could get an Oscar nomination for something before his career is over. I think he's a very underrated character actor. Anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.